For many people, myself included, seeing somebody driving along with a phone in their hands is a source of frustration. But two questions arise from a Twitter thread, which I will show in a moment. One, what if the phone is on your lap? And secondly, what if that is not a phone, but a Sat Nav? That's what I'm going to clear up in this video. Welcome back to the channel. So I come across a Twitter thread from Cycling Mikey, which I will show just here. Not there, because that's the law that I'm going to refer to in a moment. So this tweet from Cycling Mikey here says, so it seems that a lit up phone screen with the phone resting on your thigh counts as handheld. I'll come back to that in a moment, as I've had a number of such examples go forwards for prosecution. They'd been using the phone. What about drivers with a Sat Nav open and running on the thigh? Would you report them? Now, I'll link this Twitter thread in the comments below, in the description below. You can comment in the comments below. I'll put this in the description below. That's my bit. So you can vote. Would you report it, not report it, or you just want to see the results on Twitter? Now, let's take a close look at the legislation, because many of you know, and if you didn't know, you're about to know, that the law changed to pretty much cover everything that you can possibly do with a mobile phone. That if it's in your hand and you're doing any of these, you're breaking the law, you're going to get 6 points. And if you've already got 6 points, you're going to get 12, and then you're going to get an obligatory ban unless you can show exceptional hardship. So the amendments that were made into Regulation 110, firstly, changed what performs means and substituted it with is capable of transmitting and receiving data, whether or not those capabilities are enabled. So I'll come back to that in a moment. Capable of transmitting and receiving data. And as I said, I'll come back to that in a moment. It played a particular part in a Court of Appeal case. Now, the exceptions are where a person does not contravene this provision if it is obviously making a contactless payment and the car is stationary, or it is some kind of emergency or whatever. Now, let's look at this list, which defines very broadly, and I mean very broadly, what is contained within this regulation that you'll be breaching this law with. Illuminating the screen. So clearly, if you do anything at all, you're illuminating the screen. So right off the bat there, that covers absolutely everything. But even if the screen's already illuminated and you're not illuminating the screen, don't think that there's some kind of loophole there, because even if you're just checking the time, so even if you just hold the phone and said, I was just checking the time, you're still in breach of this regulation. Checking notifications. It doesn't mean reading them or going into the app or anything else. It just says checking notifications. So any lawyer is going to argue that even if you just check whether you've received a message or not, even whether you go in to read that message, you've checked the notifications and you're in breach of this regulation. Unlocking the device, making, receiving, or rejecting a telephone or internet-based call. So even rejecting the call. So you're supposed to really ignore it if this is in your hand. You're not supposed to do anything with it. Don't have it in your hand. That's the simple answer, but I'll come back to those various questions in a moment. Sending, receiving, uploading oral or written content. So that includes voice-activated or Siri messages. Forgive me if your phone just jumped, probably didn't, but sending, receiving, uploading photos or videos, utilizing the camera, video, sound recording, drafting any text, accessing any stored data, accessing an application, accessing the internet. So all of these things, it doesn't really matter what it is you're doing. If you're using a phone to do any of these or anything that relies on any of these, you're in breach of the regulation. But the question does come about, what about a Sat Nav? And what about if it's on your thigh? Well, as Cycling Mikey said, several such cases have gone forward for prosecution because it's on your thigh. Because if it's on your thigh, it's necessarily handheld. A court is going to take the view that this is not secured in a cradle somewhere. You're going to have it on your person, literally, quite literally on your person. So it's going to be necessarily handheld for some of this purpose. Now, just touching on the Sat Nav for a moment, it's any device which is capable of transmitting or receiving data. It doesn't have to be doing that. It just has to be capable of doing that. And Sat Navs are going to be capable of doing that. Pretty much all of them, I would have thought. But even then, just not activating that feature is not an excuse. It's capable of doing so. If you've got it in your hand, that's going to come under the regulation as well. Unless, of course, it's fixed. And if it's fixed, that's different. But is it on your thigh? Well, in my view, yes, it's going to be handheld for the same reason a phone is going to be handheld. But coming back to what I mentioned earlier about the transmitting and receiving data, credit here to, actually, that's the wrong one. Credit here to publicdefenseservice.org.uk. One-way communication is entirely sufficient. So this was the Barreto case. Appellant's conviction upheld on the basis that Bluetooth connection was not incidental to the use of the mobile phone. It was found in this case that the one-way communication may or may not have been one-way It was found that the communication may or may not have been one-way, but one-way communication was sufficient. The appellant's mobile interacted with the vehicle's Bluetooth system. This is one thing that I've mentioned before, and that was enough. So the Court of Appeal was satisfied that he'd been rightly convicted. It did obviously throw up lots of issues, and as I say, this list of things here for any device which is capable of transmitting or receiving data. It doesn't really matter what the device is. It could be a phone, it could be an iPad, it could be a Sat Nav or whatever. If it's doing any of those things which is capable of transmitting and receiving data, whether or not those are enabled, even if you're just checking something, this is going to fall under the same thing. And so even if the argument is put forward that it is not, it's not there and then transmitting or receiving any data, but it is capable of doing so. And when you compare this list, illuminating the screen, checking the time, checking notifications, unlocking the device, etc., 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 that is not going to exculpate liability just because it's a sat nav, just because you're checking where you're going. Quite the reverse, I would have thought. If you're looking at a sat nav for directions and it's on your thigh handheld, that is, in my view, certainly going to come under the same rules. If it's fixed, many of you will argue, well, what's the difference if it's fixed? The difference is, if it's in your hand, it is much more of a distraction because it is physically held in your hands. If it's on the thigh, I've had clients who've had it on the thigh and genuinely not had it in their hand and are running that as a mitigation of sorts because, strictly speaking, you are guilty of the offence, but it is a mitigation of sorts in that you're not physically holding it in your hand. But that depends on the magistrate on the day. So those are my views. Very interesting tweet. Go and check that out in the description below. And just finally, a quick word of thanks to all of my channel members and my Patreons. Some people call them patrons, but Patreons, I'm going to stick with Patreon so you know what the website is. Thank you to all my channel members for supporting this channel on an ongoing basis. There are hundreds of you. I'm very grateful for you supporting this channel so I can comment on these things and keep coming back and spend much more time helping you to understand law. And I'm going to let this credit run through. When you join as a member, you get stripes against your name, and I can filter your comments so I can see your comments and I can pick those up as ideas to run with. And of course, I'll get to thank you on this channel. So thank you very much, and stay tuned for next time.